He had everything most people dream about. A tall glass house on a hill, cars that shined even at night, and a bank account that never worried about numbers. People spoke his name with respect, sometimes with fear. Meetings stopped when he walked in. Doors opened before he touched them. Yet every night, when the city lights dimmed and the world went quiet, his home felt heavy and restless. The real problem was not business pressure or competition. It was his son. The boy was still young, but his eyes carried a tired look that did not match his age. Loud sounds made him freeze. Crowded places made his breathing short and uneven. Nights were the worst. He woke up often, crying without clear reason, holding onto his father's arm as if the dark itself was chasing him. Doctors gave names to the problem, long words that sounded smart but felt empty. Therapists came and went. Expensive treatments were tried, changed, and tried again. Nothing lasted. The man would sit beside his son's bed many nights, watching his small chest rise and fall. He felt powerless in a way he had never known. In the office, problems had answers. Money could fix delays, smooth conflicts, and silence doubts. At home, none of that worked. The boy did not care about wealth. Fear did not listen to status. People around him often said he was lucky. They saw the success, the lifestyle, the control. They did not see him standing quietly in the hallway at night, listening for movement from the child's room. They did not hear the soft questions he asked himself. What am I missing? Why can't I protect my own child? He tried to hide his worry from the world. At public events, he smiled. In meetings, he spoke with confidence. But inside, his thoughts kept returning to the same place. Peace. That was all he wanted for his son. Not awards. Not praise. Just peace. One morning, he prepared for a long business trip overseas. Important deals waited on the other side of the ocean. He considered going alone, but something inside him pushed for his son to come along. Maybe a change of place would help. Maybe the sky, the movement, the break from routine could calm him. Or maybe the father simply did not want to be far away. The house was busy that day. Assistants moved quickly. Bags were checked and rechecked. Instructions were given in low, serious voices. The boy sat quietly on the sofa, holding a small object in his hand, rubbing it with his thumb again and again. The father noticed it and sat beside him. "It will be okay," he said softly. Though he was not sure if he meant the flight or life itself. The drive to the airport was smooth. The boy's body stayed stiff. His eyes followed every movement outside the window. The father kept one hand close, ready to comfort, ready to react. At the airport, the bright lights and noise made the boy tense. People rushed past without noticing. For them, it was just another day of travel. For the father, every step felt like walking through glass. Private lounges and special lines made things easier. But fear does not care about comfort. The boy's breathing grew faster as the boarding time approached. The father knelt in front of him, lowering his voice, trying to stay calm. "Look at me," he said gently. "I'm right here." The boy nodded but said nothing. As they boarded the plane, the father felt the familiar knot in his chest. He had flown hundreds of times. Turbulence, delays, long hours in the air meant nothing to him. But this time, he watched his son more than the wings or the sky. He took their seats, placing the boy by the window so he could see the clouds. Sometimes that helped. The plane doors closed. The engines began their low, steady sound. The boy's hands tightened. The father noticed, as always. He placed his hand over his son's, trying to share warmth, trying to share calm. He thought about how strange life was. He could control markets, but not moments. He could shape futures for companies, but not emotions for a child. The thought made him tired in a way sleep could not fix, as the plane began to move. The father leaned back slightly, forcing himself to breathe slowly. He reminded himself that fear feeds on fear. If he stayed calm, maybe his son would follow. Around them, passengers settled in. Some smiled politely. Others avoided eye contact. A few glanced at the boy with mild curiosity. Not knowing the story behind his silence, the father looked down at his son's face. He wondered what thoughts lived in that small mind. What memories or feelings made the world feel so unsafe? He wished he could take that fear and carry it himself. For a moment, as the plane lifted off the ground, there was silence between them. The boy's eyes widened, then slowly closed. The father held his breath, unsure if calm or panic would come next. He did not know it yet. But this flight was about to change more than just their destination. It was the beginning of a lesson he had never learned in boardrooms or offices. A lesson that would remind him that the smallest moments, the quietest actions, often carry the greatest power at that moment. Though all he felt was hope mixed with fear. Rising with the plane into the open sky, the plane had been in the air for a little while, and the hum of the engines filled the cabin like a constant heartbeat. Most passengers were quiet, reading, watching screens, or dozing. The father kept his eyes on his son, noticing the small ways his body moved when anxiety crept in. Fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, feet tapped the floor, and every time the plane hit a slight bump, the boy flinched. He tried to distract him, pointing to the clouds outside. Describing their shapes as dragons, castles, or islands, the boy listened for a while, then looked away, staring out into the endless white. The father realized that simple distractions weren't enough. The fear was deeper than he had imagined. It wasn't just about turbulence or being in the air. It was a shadow that followed him, uninvited in every new place. Then, without warning, a stronger bump shook the plane. The boy gasped and clutched his father's arm tightly. Tears filled his eyes. His body shook, and he whispered, "I don't want this. I can't do this." The father felt his chest tighten. He knelt beside him in the cramped space, speaking in a low, calm voice. "I'm right here. Look at me. Nothing can hurt you. Not while I am with you." The boy nodded, but his hand stayed tight around his father's arm. Around them, other passengers glanced over, some with concern, others with impatience. The father ignored them. He knew they didn't understand. They could not see the battles fought quietly in small bodies, or the nights spent watching a child fight invisible fears as the plane leveled out. The boy slowly relaxed for a moment, then tensed again when he saw a passenger walking down the aisle too close to him. His breaths came short and quick. The father realized he needed more than words. He tried holding his son's hand, rubbing it gently, stroking his back, whispering calm reassurances. The boy's small body began to tremble less, but his eyes still darted nervously around the cabin. The father noticed a quiet woman seated across the aisle, watching. She was older, her face gentle, with kind eyes. Unlike others, she didn't look annoyed or curious. She looked concerned. At first, he hesitated to engage her. He was proud, used to controlling situations, but this was different. He needed help, even if it came from a stranger. The woman leaned slightly, speaking softly. "It's okay. He's scared. That's natural. Just sit with him. Don't try to fight the fear. Let him know he is safe." Her words struck him, simple but profound. He had spent years searching for solutions in books, therapies, and expensive programs. He had never thought that a quiet, kind voice could reach his son in a moment of panic. He thanked her silently and returned his attention to the boy. Letting go of control for a moment, just staying present. Minutes passed slowly. Every minor sound from the plane, every movement from other passengers seemed amplified to the boy. The father kept talking in soft tones, describing the sky outside, reminding him of the warm sun, the gentle clouds, the adventures waiting at the destination. He let the boy ask questions, even if they didn't make sense. He never interrupted or dismissed the feelings. The woman across the aisle remained, occasionally offering a word of encouragement. Her presence, quiet but steady, seemed to calm something in the father too. He realized he wasn't alone in this, that sometimes kindness comes from places you least expect. The boy's hands loosened slightly. His breaths became longer, smoother. Then came the turbulence. The plane dipped slightly, and panic rose like a wave in the boy's chest. He gripped his father's hand and buried his face against him. The father held him, rocking slightly in rhythm with the plane's movement, whispering, "It's okay. Nothing bad is happening. You are safe around them." Some passengers stiffened, worried about the disruption, but the father ignored them. He focused on small victories, a breath held, a tear wiped, a hand unclenched. Each was a sign that his son was learning, slowly. That fear could be faced with support. The boy whispered, almost to himself, "I don't want it to move." "I know," the father replied. "I know, but I'm here. And I will not let anything hurt you." Hours passed. The boy shifted, relaxed a little more, and even looked out the window with curiosity. He started pointing at shapes in the clouds, naming them quietly. The father smiled, heart heavy with relief, realizing how fragile courage could be and how powerful simple presence was. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. The father asked if the boy could have some juice. It helped for a moment, a small act of normalcy amidst anxiety. He saw the boy's shoulders relax slightly, his fingers unclenching. Later, a fellow passenger, noticing the struggle, leaned over again. "He's doing well," she said softly. "Sometimes just knowing someone cares is enough." The father nodded, grateful. He realized that despite the wealth surrounding him, despite all the material solutions, it had been the human touch, the shared understanding, that mattered most. By the time the in-flight meal came, the boy was quieter, though still watchful. The father stayed near, reading a book to him, talking about stories of adventure and courage. He never tried to force calm, only offered safety, presence, and patience. Even the simplest things, the gentle squeeze of a hand, the calm voice of a stranger, the allowance for fear without judgment began to work small miracles. The boy laughed quietly at a story, leaned his head against his father, and for the first time in years, seemed to trust the world beyond his fears. The father watched with wonder. He had thought he had tried everything, spent all the money, consulted all the experts. But here, in the middle of the air, far from home, in a simple moment of human connection, something real was happening. The boy was learning that fear could be met with care, that he could survive, and even feel safe. Hours turned into a quiet rhythm. The boy rested, the father remained close, and the world around them faded into the background. The hum of the engines, the occasional announcement, the soft chatter of passengers, it all became secondary. For the first time, the father realized that peace, even small, fragile peace, was possible. He thought about how easy it had been to rely on money and status, how little he had understood the power of kindness and patience, how much he had missed by believing that control meant solutions. The boy, in his innocence, was teaching him a lesson older than any business wisdom, that love and attention, steady presence and compassion, sometimes from strangers, could reach places wealth never could. The rest of the flight moved with small steps forward. Every sigh, every smile, every quiet laugh was a victory. Every time the boy reached for his father, he responded with calm, without frustration. He learned slowly that the world was not always dangerous, that turbulence passed, and safety could exist even in unfamiliar skies. As the plane neared its destination, the father reflected on the journey. It had been more than a physical trip. It was a lesson in humanity, in patience, in quiet courage. He felt a growing sense of gratitude toward the stranger who had spoken words of understanding. She had reminded him that even in his world of influence and control, the simplest gestures mattered most. The boy sat quietly, eyes wide with curiosity, not fear. He held his father's hand lightly, a small sign of trust. The father smiled, feeling the first real sense of relief in years. The flight had not been easy, but it had begun a change that no money could buy. Above the clouds, in the hum of the engines, in the soft movement of the plane, the father understood something he had never fully known, that fear can be faced, that courage is fragile and patient, and that sometimes it takes nothing more than a quiet presence, a kind word, and the willingness to be there fully. To begin healing wounds money cannot touch, the plane had settled into a steady rhythm, the turbulence now behind them. And the cabin was quiet, except for the soft hum of engines and occasional announcements. The boy's small hands were now resting on his lap, though his body still carried a tension that spoke of deep worry. His eyes scanned the clouds outside, fascinated, yet cautious, as if expecting the sky itself to shift into danger. The father watched every small movement. He could feel his own heart beating faster than usual, not from fear of flying, but from the uncertainty of the moment. He had watched his son struggle so many times that he had grown wary of even small signs of anxiety. One glance could send panic rising, one touch could calm it. Everything felt delicate, fragile, as if the world were balanced on a single breath, across the aisle. The quiet woman from earlier had noticed the boy's continued unease. She had been watching him with gentle attention, sensing the depth of his fear and the father's exhaustion. She did not move immediately, not wanting to intrude, but she stayed present in a way that offered silent support. There was a rhythm to her calmness that began to touch the father, reminding him that someone else cared, someone without any expectation. Suddenly, a minor bump shook the plane. Light enough that most passengers barely noticed, but the boy flinched, his hands gripping the armrest. His small frame trembled slightly, and his eyes darted nervously. The father leaned closer, ready to offer his comfort, when he noticed something the woman across the aisle had taken. A small notebook from her bag and was quietly sketching something. Curious, he watched as she drew a simple scene of clouds, a sun smiling, and a tiny figure standing strong amid gentle winds. It was uncomplicated, almost childlike, yet there was a calm strength in the lines. The boy's attention shifted. His eyes followed her movements, fascinated by the shapes and colors she was creating. The father felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this small, quiet act could reach a part of his son that words could not. The woman noticed the boy watching and smiled softly. Without speaking loudly, she held up the notebook, showing him the drawing. Then she gestured for him to imagine he could be that small figure, standing calmly in the clouds, despite the winds around him. The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. His small fingers inched toward the edge of the notebook, wanting to touch the page, wanting to be part of this tiny world she had created. The father felt a rush of relief and gratitude. This stranger, with no obligation, had created a bridge to his son's mind, a way to show calm without demanding it. He gently encouraged the boy, whispering, "Do you want to try drawing too?" The boy's eyes widened, surprise and curiosity mingling. Nodding carefully, he took a blank sheet from the woman's small pile and a pencil she offered. The first strokes were hesitant, light, unsure. But with each line, his confidence grew. The tremor in his hands softened, and for the first time in hours he seemed fully absorbed, fully present. The father watched, heart swelling, realizing that a small act, this simple, quiet interaction, was beginning to transform fear into curiosity, anxiety into creativity. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The boy had created a small world of his own on the paper, a place where clouds were friendly and the sun always smiled. He showed it to the woman, whose gentle nods and smiles reinforced his success. He laughed quietly at one of her playful additions, a tiny bird with wings too large, yet flying confidently in the sky. The sound was soft but full of relief, a moment of joy the father had not heard in months. The father realized he had underestimated the power of human connection, presence and kindness, without expectation. All the therapies, all the expensive treatments, all the carefully planned schedules could not match the simple gift of attention, of empathy, of seeing a child's fear and meeting it with patience rather than solutions. Other passengers began to notice too. Some with curiosity, others with subtle smiles. The tension in the area slowly eased. The boy continued to draw, pointing at shapes in the clouds, and even whispering stories to the woman, who listened as if each word mattered deeply. The father joined in, not taking over, but narrating simple tales, following the boy's imagination. The air between them softened, became a small safe space amid the confines of the airplane, for the first time. The boy did not glance around nervously with every sound. He did not cling to his father in fear. He was present, engaged, learning that there could be safety even when the world moved unpredictably around him. And the father, in turn, learned that control was not always necessary. Sometimes the right presence, the right timing, and a small act of kindness could open doors no amount of money or planning could unlock. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. The father let the boy have a small treat, another tiny step toward normalcy. He observed how such a small gesture could reinforce confidence. How these minute details mattered when a child was learning that the world was not always threatening. Hours passed, and the boy's body relaxed further. He leaned slightly against his father, sometimes looking out the window, sometimes focusing on his drawings. The quiet woman across the aisle offered encouraging words from time to time, soft voice that carried no demand, but infinite understanding. The father reflected on how much this small act meant. He had believed that solutions required expertise and money, that power could shield his son. Yet here, above the clouds, he witnessed that peace often arrived not through control or wealth, but through human touch, through shared patience, and through gestures of compassion that cost nothing but mattered deeply. The boy's drawings grew more detailed, more confident, showing dragons and castles, but gentle ones, friendly, safe. He shared the stories with his father and the woman, narrating adventures where he was brave, where he faced storms, and always found calm. Each story was a step away from fear, small victory in a journey the father had long thought endless. The father, too, joined the small world they had created. He drew lightly, laughing quietly at mistakes, showing the boy that imperfection was acceptable, that mistakes did not lead to danger. The boy's laughter grew more natural, less forced, as he began to feel the warmth of presence without judgment. The stranger's presence remained quiet but vital. She did not dominate the interaction, did not force attention, but her gentle guidance and open, patient listening had created a ripple effect. The father realized he had been blind to such simple methods. He had chased complex solutions, missing the profound power of a quiet act of kindness. The ability of a human connection to reach a child's heart when fear had clouded every other path. By the time the flight approached its destination, the boy's tension had eased remarkably. He looked out the window at the descending sun, eyes bright with curiosity, not fear. He held his father's hand lightly, a small but profound signal of trust. The father felt a mixture of relief and awe, understanding that this flight, these few hours, had begun a transformation that money could never buy. As the plane prepared to land, he whispered softly to his son, "You did very well. I am so proud of you." The boy smiled faintly but genuinely, a smile that reached his eyes. It was not forced, not a mask for fear. It was real, a reflection of a small victory, a triumph over anxiety nurtured by compassion and presence. In that moment, father understood something deeper than any business lesson. Courage could be fragile, fear could be persistent, but human connection could be transformative. The smallest gestures, a notebook, a smile, a soft word, could change lives in ways money and influence never could. He realized that this journey above the clouds, filled with turbulence and fear, had become a journey of trust, patience, and the power of simple kindness. The plane touched down smoothly, and the cabin filled with the usual sounds of seatbelts clicking, bags being adjusted, and passengers preparing to move. But for the father and his son, the moment felt different. There was a quiet shift in the air, subtle yet profound. The boy's small hand rested lightly in his father's, his shoulders no longer tense, his eyes curious rather than fearful. He glanced around at the other passengers with mild interest, no longer shrinking at every noise. The father allowed himself a moment of relief, though he remained alert, watching for any signs of returning anxiety. The lessons of the flight were clear. Change had begun, but it was fragile. He had seen firsthand the impact of kindness and presence, the small notebook, the gentle words. The patient listening these had created an environment where his son could breathe, could feel safe, and could trust as they moved toward the exit. The quiet woman who had helped so much leaned over, smiling softly. "He's brave," she said simply. "You've both done very well." The father nodded, gratitude flooding him. He wanted to say more, to express how much her small gesture had meant, but words felt insufficient. Instead, he offered a quiet nod, smile that carried the depth of his appreciation. Outside the plane, the sun shone warmly, casting golden light across the tarmac. The father lifted his son gently, feeling the small weight in his arms, marveling at how fragile yet resilient children could be. They moved toward the car, the boy's curiosity growing with each step, pointing at vehicles, workers, and the distant horizon. The drive to their hotel was quiet. The boy asked occasional questions, no longer in panic, but with genuine interest. The father answered, watching the sky and the passing landscape. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope that the change they had begun in the air might extend into everyday life. That evening, as they settled into their room, the father reflected on the journey. He had spent years focused on wealth, influence, and control, believing these could protect his child. Yet he realized that control alone could not shield him from his son's fear. What mattered was presence, empathy, and the courage to meet fear without judgment. Money could build comfort, but it could not build trust, calm, or understanding. He watched his son unpack a small bag, carefully arranging items with focus and care. The boy spoke softly about what he had seen from the plane, about clouds and drawings, about the strange woman who had shared her notebook. The father listened, offering gentle encouragement, proud yet humbled. Each story was a small sign that the boy's world was expanding, a trust was being built. The father called the family physician later that evening, explaining how the flight had gone. The doctor listened, impressed. "It sounds like the combination of support and presence made a real difference," the doctor said. "Sometimes children respond to human connection in ways no medicine can replicate." The father hung up, reflecting on the truth of those words. He had spent thousands on treatments, consulted countless experts, and yet it was a simple act of human kindness, shared in a confined space, that had sparked change. He felt both humbled and enlightened. Life had taught him a lesson no boardroom or financial deal could convey. Over the following days, the boy began to change more noticeably. He ventured into new experiences, tested his own limits gently, and sought comfort in the father's presence, rather than clinging to fear. The father encouraged him to explore, to ask questions, to share thoughts and feelings. They drew together, laughed together, and slowly the boy's confidence grew. The father also began to change. He spent more time observing, listening, and reflecting rather than solving. He noticed the importance of small gestures, a touch on the shoulder, a smile, a moment of patient listening. These acts, he realized, could transform anxiety into courage and fear into trust. One morning, as they walked along a quiet street in the city they were visiting, the boy noticed a small child crying on a bench nearby. Without hesitation, he approached, offering a comforting word and a small drawing he had made. The father watched astonished. The boy was extending the kindness he had received, showing empathy and compassion naturally. The lesson of the plane had taken root, shaping not only his trust, but his ability to connect with others. The father felt a deep shift in perspective. He understood that life's greatest wealth was not in money, possessions, or status, but in the ability to connect, to nurture, and to act with compassion. He began to see his own role differently, not as a protector through power or control, but as a guide, a presence, a steady source of safety and love, even in business meetings that followed. His thoughts often returned to these lessons. He realized that the skills of patience, listening, and understanding could improve every aspect of life, from family to colleagues. Wealth could create opportunity, but human connection created meaning. By the end of the trip, the boy had grown visibly calmer, more open, and more confident. He laughed freely, shared his thoughts without hesitation, and sought comfort only when needed. The father felt a sense of fulfillment deeper than any professional achievement. He had witnessed a transformation in his son, a movement from fear to trust, guided not by money or control, but by the quiet power of presence and kindness. As they prepared to return home, the father reflected on the woman on the plane. Her small, selfless act had changed their lives in ways no material gift could. He resolved to pay that lesson forward, to act with empathy and patience in his interactions. and to teach his son the value of kindness and understanding in every aspect of life. On the flight home, the boy leaned comfortably against his father, reading a book and occasionally glancing at the sky outside. The father allowed himself a moment to savor the quiet peace, realizing that true change often happens in small, unnoticed ways. The journey above the clouds had been more than a physical flight. It had been a journey of hearts, of trust, and of connection. He thought about the future with cautious optimism. There would still be challenges, moments of fear and uncertainty, but now he understood the tools needed: patience, presence, and the willingness to act with empathy. These were the things that could shape courage, build trust, transform fear into understanding. By the time they landed, Father's heart was lighter and the boy's spirit was brighter. The plane had carried them across the sky, but it had also carried them through a journey of growth, healing, and understanding. The lessons of kindness and human connection had quietly changed their lives, creating a foundation upon which trust, courage, and peace could flourish. The father knew that wealth and power could never replace these lessons, but he also knew that with them, life could be richer in ways he had never imagined. Back home, the quiet peace that had begun on the plane continued to grow. The father noticed it in small ways first. The boy slept through the night without waking in panic. He ate without fidgeting, and he approached each day with curiosity instead of fear. These small victories brought a deep sense of relief and wonder to the father. He realized that change had taken root, not through commands, money, or control, but through patience, presence, and kindness. Each morning they spent time together, walking in the garden, reading, or drawing. The boy's imagination flourished, and he shared stories about clouds, birds, adventures in a way that was untainted by fear. The father listened, guiding gently, offering support and letting the boy lead. He had learned that being present, without pushing, was more effective than any strict plan or expensive therapy. Trust was being built through shared moments, not transactions. The father also began to reflect on his own life. He had spent years chasing wealth and influence, believing they could solve every problem, even emotional ones. But he had been blind to the most powerful tools: empathy, understanding, and human connection. The flight had opened his eyes. A stranger's small act of kindness had changed everything. It taught him that real change comes not from money or power, but from being fully present and caring deeply. One day, the father took his son to the park. They watched other children play, and the boy approached them cautiously at first. Then he began to interact, sharing a toy, offering a smile, and listening to stories from other children. The father watched, amazed at the courage and confidence growing in his son. He realized that trust and empathy were contagious. What had been sparked by a quiet stranger on a plane was now being reflected outward into the world around them. The father also made subtle changes in his own life. Meetings were approached with more patience, decisions were made with consideration, and he spent more time observing and listening rather than directing. He saw how much could be accomplished when people felt understood and safe, and he applied these lessons both at home and in his work. Small gestures of attention and kindness, he discovered, could have powerful effects, creating trust and openness that money alone could never buy at night. The father would sit with his son, sometimes reading, sometimes talking about the day, sometimes just being quiet together. These moments were precious. The boy's fears no longer controlled him. He had learned to rely on his own courage. Nurtured by the consistent presence of his father and the memory of the stranger's kindness, each day was a building block, strengthening the foundation of trust, safety, and confidence. Over time, the boy began to show more independence. He ventured into new experiences with curiosity instead of fear. He asked questions, explored, and engaged with the world. The father encouraged him, not by controlling, but by supporting, guiding, and celebrating small successes. It was a delicate balance. But the lessons from the flight had given him the understanding needed to nurture growth. Without pressure, the father reflected often on the stranger who had helped them. Her act had been so small, yet so powerful. It reminded him that human kindness is a force that cannot be bought, controlled, or manufactured. It exists in moments of empathy, in listening without judgment, in offering support without expecting anything in return. He felt gratitude and a deep desire to carry that lesson forward, to act with compassion in every area of his life, and to teach his son to do the same. As weeks turned into months, the transformation in the boy became more apparent. He laughed freely, expressed himself without hesitation, and faced challenges with confidence. The father felt immense pride, tempered by humility. He had learned that true wealth is not measured in money or material success, but in the ability to nurture, to connect, and to create environments where others can grow without fear. Family life changed subtly, but profoundly. The household was filled with more laughter, more conversation, and more understanding. The father approached parenting with patience and attention, valuing each moment over any schedule or plan. He observed and responded, not dictated, and found joy in the progress of his son's growth. The lessons learned above the clouds had reshaped their daily life. The father also shared these experiences with close friends and family, emphasizing the importance of empathy, presence, and patience. He spoke not of strategies or methods, but of listening, noticing, and being there. People who knew him were struck by the change, noticing a new warmth and calmness in his demeanor. His son's progress had influenced not just their immediate family, but also the father's approach to life in general. The boy, inspired by the kindness he had received, began to show it to others. He offered help, shared stories, and approached new children with gentle curiosity. The father watched, amazed, as the ripple effect of the flight's small acts of empathy continued to unfold. What had started as a journey across the sky had become a lesson in life, teaching both father and son that the smallest gestures can have the deepest impact. The father reflected on how he had once believed that only money and status could solve problems. He realized now that true solutions come from the heart, from attention, patience, understanding, and love. Wealth could create comfort, but it could not create courage, trust, or peace. These required presence and empathy, and the father had learned this lesson in the most profound way, watching his son grow, heal, and thrive. One evening, as they sat together watching the sun set, the father whispered, "I am proud of you. More than anything else in the world?" The boy smiled softly, leaning against him, not afraid, not tense, simply present. The father understood then that peace was no longer a distant hope, had become a reality. It was built slowly, carefully, with human connection, small gestures, an unwavering presence. He vowed to continue this way, carrying forward the lesson learned from a stranger's quiet kindness on a plane. It was a reminder that the simplest acts could change lives, that presence and empathy were more powerful than wealth, and that love expressed with patience and understanding could heal wounds no money could reach. The journey had begun in fear and uncertainty, but it ended in a calm, steady peace that promised growth, connection, and joy for years to come. The father realized that he had gained something far beyond business success, material wealth, or recognition. He had discovered the profound impact of human kindness, and he had witnessed its power to transform fear into trust, anxiety into courage, and helplessness into hope. His son had learned to trust himself in the world, guided by patience, empathy, and love. As they prepared for the future, the father knew that challenges would still arise. Fear, uncertainty, and struggle would return at times. But now he possessed the tools to navigate them, not money, not control, but presence, understanding, and compassion. He would be there for his son, and together they would continue to grow, learn, and live fully in the quiet of the evening. With the boy resting peacefully beside him, the father finally felt it, true peace. It was not the peace that money could buy, nor the illusion of control over the world. It was the peace that comes from love, from being present, from nurturing trust and courage in another human being. It was a peace that could not be shaken by the turbulence of life, because it had been built in moments of care, patience, and understanding. And that peace finally was theirs. Weeks turned into months, and the boy continued to grow in confidence and trust. Each day brought new experiences, small and large, that reinforced what had begun on the plane. The father watched with a mixture of awe and humility as his son discovered that the world was not a place to fear, but a place where kindness and courage could flourish. The transformation was gradual, imperceptible in one moment, but undeniable over time. Mornings became a time for shared routines. The father and son would walk in the garden, talk about the day ahead, or explore small adventures nearby. Sometimes they would simply sit together, noticing birds, clouds, or the gentle sway of trees. The father realized that these quiet moments were building trust far more effectively than any lecture or structured activity ever could. Presence, attention, and patience had become their most powerful tools. At school, the boy began to interact more openly with peers. Teachers noticed his calm demeanor and willingness to participate. He joined small group activities, shared ideas, and even comforted others who appeared anxious or upset. The father received messages from the school expressing appreciation for the boy's growth. He knew that what had started on a flight, with a stranger's small gesture, had created a ripple effect, reaching far beyond their immediate life. The father also made subtle changes in his own life. He approached work with a new perspective, focusing not only on results, but on the people around him. Meetings became spaces for listening, understanding, and collaboration rather than dominance and control. Colleagues noticed the change, often remarking on his calm presence and ability to resolve tensions with patience rather than authority. He had discovered that empathy was a skill that could transform both family and professional life. The bond between father and son deepened with each passing day. They shared stories, laughter, and even tears, creating a foundation of trust and understanding. The boy no longer feared the world. He met challenges with curiosity and courage. The father marveled at his growth and reflected on the lessons they had both learned, that fear can be transformed by care, that courage grows through support, and that human connection is more powerful than any material wealth. On weekends, they engaged in small projects together. They built a treehouse in the garden, planting flowers around it, and creating a space where imagination could thrive. The boy took the lead in design and construction, with the father offering guidance and encouragement rather than control. Through this process, the boy learned problem-solving, confidence, and the joy of collaboration. The father learned patience, humility, and the rewards of letting someone else take the lead. The father also reflected on the woman from the plane. Her simple act of kindness had created the turning point for his son's journey. He thought often about how one person, without expectation or reward, could change lives. Inspired, he began to perform small acts of kindness himself, reaching out to strangers, helping those in need, and encouraging his son to do the same. They discovered together that compassion was contagious and that each small action had the power to uplift others. Family gatherings became moments of sharing and learning. The father told stories of the plane, of fear, and of courage. He emphasized the importance of kindness, presence, and patience. Extended family and friends noticed the boy's confidence and the father's changed approach. The conversations were richer, more understanding, and filled with empathy. Life became less about control and more about connection. The boy's trust in his father grew each day. He shared thoughts and worries openly, knowing he would be heard and supported. The father responded with guidance, gentle advice, and encouragement. He learned that listening deeply, without rushing to solve problems, allowed the boy to find his own solutions. Courage, he realized, could not be given. It had to be nurtured. During one afternoon in the park, the boy noticed another child struggling to climb a tree. Without hesitation, he ran over to help, offering words of encouragement and showing the child how to find safe footing. The father watched, overwhelmed with pride. The lessons of empathy and courage were spreading naturally, extending beyond their family into the lives of others. At night, the father and son continued their evening routines. They read stories, discussed dreams, and reflected on the day. These moments, simple yet profound, strengthened their bond, and reinforced the boy's sense of safety and confidence. The father had learned that true influence came not from authority or wealth, but from being present, attentive, and compassionate. As the seasons changed, so did their understanding of life's priorities. The father spent less time chasing business milestones and more time creating meaningful experiences with his son. He discovered that joy could be found in ordinary moments. A shared laugh, a quiet conversation, or a walk in the garden. These moments, once overlooked, had become the true treasures of life. The boy continued to grow, both emotionally and socially. He approached new challenges with curiosity, resilience, and patience. The father observed how trust, once established, allowed for exploration and growth. The lessons learned from a simple act of kindness on a plane had transformed not only the boy, but the father as well. They had discovered together that the world could be faced with courage, that peace and confidence were built through consistent care and connection. The father also reflected on his own inner journey. He'd once believed that success meant control, power, and wealth. Now he understood that true fulfillment came from relationships, empathy, and the ability to nurture growth in others. The flight had been a turning point, showing him that human connection was the most valuable currency in life. Wealth could provide comfort, but only love, presence, and understanding could provide lasting peace. Over time, the boy began to mentor younger children, sharing his experiences, encouraging bravery, and modeling patience. The father watched, amazed at the cycle of kindness and trust unfolding before him. The impact of a small act on the plane had grown into a life-changing lesson that extended beyond their own family. The father often reflected on how small gestures could change lives in ways no one could predict. He had learned that attention, presence, and empathy were powerful tools. The flight had been more than a physical journey. It had been a journey of hearts, teaching lessons that could not be taught in books or bought with money. Courage, trust, and peace were cultivated through care, connection, and kindness. As the boy prepared for each day, he carried with him the lessons learned that fear could be faced, that support could be found in others, and that even the smallest acts of empathy could make a difference. The father knew that these lessons would guide him throughout life, equipping him with resilience and compassion. Even in challenging moments, when life presented obstacles, the boy remained grounded. He knew that fear was temporary, that support and patience could overcome anxiety, and that courage was strengthened by trust. The father felt immense gratitude for the journey they had shared. Realizing that true happiness came from these moments of growth and understanding, the father continued to live intentionally, prioritizing relationships over possessions, empathy over authority, and connection over control. He engaged with the world in a new way, extending kindness to others, offering guidance, and practicing patience. Life became richer, not because of wealth or status, but because of the depth of human connection. As the months passed, the father and son reflected often on their journey. They remembered the flight, the stranger's kindness, and the slow, steady transformation that followed. These memories became guiding principles, shaping the way they lived and interacted with others. Courage, trust, empathy, and patience had become core values, influencing every choice and action. The boy's confidence continued to grow, his trust in the world strengthened by consistent care and attention. The father marveled at the progress, grateful for the lessons learned, and inspired to continue acting with compassion. Together, they had discovered that life's greatest treasures are not material but emotional. It's built through love, patience, and presence. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, the father whispered softly, "We have come a long way, haven't we?" The boy nodded, smiling, feeling safe, confident, and free from fear. The father understood that their journey had not ended. It was ongoing, a continuous process of growth, learning, and connection. But the foundation had been laid, strong and enduring. In the quiet of that evening, father and son felt a profound sense of peace. It was the peace that comes from understanding, empathy, and love. The peace that cannot be bought, measured, or forced. It was a peace born from shared experiences, from courage nurtured by care, and from trust built over time. The small act of kindness on the plane had set the stage for a new beginning, a life filled with connection, understanding, and joy. The father realized that while challenges would continue to appear, they could be faced with confidence. The boy had learned resilience, empathy, and courage. Together, they would navigate life's uncertainties, supported by trust, strengthened by love, and guided by the knowledge that small acts of kindness could change lives in ways that last forever. Their journey had begun with fear, but it had transformed into a new beginning, filled with hope, peace, and endless possibilities.